Now, in Turkey, the parliament has passed a law on Tuesday to round up an estimated 4 million stray dogs and place them in shelters. The new rules come amid concerns about attacks, road accidents and rabies. Under the legislation, any dog showing signs of aggressive behaviour or disease will be put down. Now, animal rights activists have been rallying for weeks against the bill. The main opposition party is vowing to challenge the legislation in court.
Protesters are sounding the alarm, as they've been doing for weeks. Istanbul animal rights activists like Caner Altay say they want to prevent mass murder, which is what they've named the Turkish government's plans for the country's many street dogs. A new government bill envisages the possible euthanasia of stray dogs in Istanbul and elsewhere. Caner is mobilizing resistance against this.
The reactions are mostly positive. Everyone knows animals that live on the street in their neighborhood. And many have also built up relationships with the strays.
Animals like Zeytin. The stray dog lives on the Asian side of Istanbul and holds a special spot in Caner Altay's heart. Caner and the dog basically grew up together. For the animal rights activists, the government's plans are the result of policy failure.
They don't even know how many stray dogs there are in the country, or how many have already been successfully sterilized. Their only solution is to catch the animals and kill them if they don't find an owner within 4 weeks.
There are probably around 2 million street dogs in Turkey, a guesstimate. In Istanbul, they're as much a part of street life as the cats. The animals are a popular subject for tourist snapshots. Although dogs are considered unclean by devout Muslims, many still live out peaceful lives on the streets, and only a few are aggressive. But now the government is planning to have dogs from the overcrowded state and municipal dog shelters offered up for adoption via the internet. If they don't find new owners, they're to be put down. And their spots will be filled with the next batch of captured street dogs, to be continued until the problem no longer exists. President Erdogan is unimpressed by the ongoing protests against the proposed law.
The previous method of capturing and sterilizing stray dogs has failed and has not provided a solution. We're going to launch a campaign to adopt the animals. Then, if we're successful, hopefully, we won't have to move on to the next step.
The next step, that would be killing the unadopted dogs.
And for more, we can speak to our correspondent Dorian Jones, who joins us now from Istanbul. So, Dorian, this controversial bill has now been passed. What's the reaction to it from people around the country?
Well, I'm at the tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, that have been protesting nationwide over this legislation. There is absolute dismay, joined by all the opposition parties who have united to oppose this bill. There's very angry scenes in Parliament during the debates, almost brawls breaking out in the committee rooms over this legislation, a sign of how strong the feelings are. And there's a genuine fear that if this legislation is put into action, it will result ultimately in millions of dogs being killed. And this evokes memories of a very dark chapter in Istanbul history way back in 1910. A similar measure was introduced where they rounded up all the dogs and put them on a nearby island just behind me. And those dogs were allowed to starve to death. And the story folklore tells that you could hear the dogs screaming for weeks and weeks. And this latest legislation certainly invokes those memories. And dogs are a very important part of Turkish culture and society for many people. In fact, Erdogan's coalition partner, the Nationalist National Action Party, its symbol is the wolf. So it is very much part of the culture and the way of life for many Turks. So it is evoking very strong feelings which even cross the deep religious divide between the secular and the religious.
So from what you're saying, these dogs really don't pose that much of a danger. They're kind of part of society. In the report we just heard, we heard Erdogan saying that, neutering the dogs hasn't worked, so now we're going to go to this next plan. I mean, was there a serious attempt to neuter dogs and to bring the population down in that way?
Well, certainly, I mean, in the main cities, here in Istanbul especially, there has been a systematic program for many, many years to sterilize and also, crucially, to vaccinate against diseases like rabies. And in fact, rabies is pretty much a minor threat and problem across Turkey. There are isolated cases, but Turkey pretty much is on top of it. And there are very few statistics about how many deaths are the result of stray dogs. There is one NGO that published questionable figures saying that maybe 200 people over 2 years have died because of dogs, and they said that also could be traffic accidents. But critics point out there are far bigger problems that Turkey has to face, given the fact that we are talking about potentially billions of dollars that would be used to construct shelters to house these millions of dogs.
So what is likely to happen next? I mean, how realistic is it, as you say, to build a whole lot of shelters, to round them up and then potentially to kill these animals?
Well, in fact, many people see that behind this legislation is Erdogan's war against the municipalities in Turkey. In March this year, his ruling AK party lost across the board the control of virtually all the main cities in Turkey. Now, the responsibility to enforce this legislation falls on those municipalities who are the opposition parties, and they have pledged not to enforce these laws. Now, under this legislation, if public officials don't enforce them, these laws, over rounding up the dogs, they face up to 2 years in jail. And that puts a question mark over key mayors in this country who are seen as potential opponents of Erdogan. So a big political showdown could be ahead if Erdogan decides to enforce this law.
Dorian Jones reporting from Istanbul. Dorian, thanks so much for the background there. Really interesting.